You. Welcome back to The Advisor. If you have not yet, please like and subscribe so we can continue to bring you amazing guests like our guest today, who has a podcast on our channel called Moms Matter. Before I introduce her, I want to thank our sponsors, Dr. Bradley Nelson, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You guys are amazing, and we appreciate you so much. And to our fans and our audience, you are also very much loved, and we're so grateful for you. So, Moms Matter, Dr. Susan Landers is back to talk about all things breastfeeding, breast milk, formula, and we're going to talk about some alternative ways that people are doing this. So, I'm really, really excited to have her back. She is a baby doctor with decades of experience caring for these tiny, most vulnerable patients. And she's not only a leader in neonatal medicine, but also an author. She shares her journey of balancing a high stakes medical career with motherhood in her book, So Many Babies. And she has a Substack article, which is growing so quickly. And if you need anything, any advice, if you're a mom, you know a mom, if you're expecting, if you want to be expecting, you're going to want to subscribe to her Substack because you're going to learn so much. It's really good to have you back.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really excited about today's topic. I have been reading in various Substack newsletters. Certain moms write newsletters about pop culture and about mom culture and about what they're seeing in the marketplace. And there have been some angry exchanges between some moms about what an influencer on Instagram said about formula and comparing it to breastfeeding and saying that formula was better than breast milk. And so all the moms are doing the usual picking sides. We
Right.
have those who I breastfed all my children for 2 or 3 years and it's the best thing under the sun. And we have those I didn't make enough milk and it was too stressful and I formula fed and it was much better for me and my baby. And then there are all of these women in between. And the stories are varied and they're important and they're a real reflection of how modern culture treats new mothers. New breastfeeding mothers have a hell of a time getting the help they need. They start in the hospital. 84% of US moms start breastfeeding. And by 6 months, only 25% are exclusively nursing. So that's a
Wow.
big drop off. That means
Yeah.
something is happening in those first few months. And some of it is lack of lactation support after they get out of the hospital. Some of it is having a pediatrician who may be inclined to supplement with formula, and the mom doesn't understand how to do that. Some of it may be having a late preterm baby because they don't nurse as well. They don't generate a supply as well. Some of it may be going back to work. That is one of the biggest factors for nursing moms. You get through the first month or 2 or 3 months, if you're lucky and you're going back to work at 2 or 3 months, and you go to a workplace that's not comfortable for you to pump. There's not a private place. There's not a
Right.
refrigerator. There's not a sink. And, there's some laws in some states, oddly enough, Texas is one of them, that say that workplaces have to provide accommodations for working breastfeeding moms.
Mm.
But in some states, this does not exist. Now, interestingly, all states in the US have laws that protect nursing in public. I get a lot of
Okay.
questions about that. So, moms who are nursing in public, feel good about that. That's your right, and you're legally entitled to do that. But American moms have a big trouble with the drop off in their ability to breastfeed between 1 to 2 months and 6 months. And so, formula is a big part of how we manage newborns and infants when we can't breastfeed, if we have a medical condition that prevents us from nursing, if we are taking a medication that's contraindicated, and that's very rare. Even antidepressants are compatible with breastfeeding. Almost all antibiotics are compatible with breastfeeding. And there's a lot
Okay.
of misunderstanding by the public that some medicines that mom takes mean you can't breastfeed. So there's a lot of information for moms to have available to them, and they don't know. They don't know all this. They just know
Mm,
they want to do what's best for their baby. Now, formula marketing has been around for decades. The
mm,
formula companies are essentially big pharma, and even the new company, I think it's called Bobby, and it's made in the UK, and it's one of those organic formulas. They're all based on cow's milk. They're not based on human milk. They take cow's milk and they take the protein and they add all this other stuff to it and they make a good nutritional product. But it is not, absolutely not nutritionally better than breast milk. And we even know that breast milk provides the best nutrition for premature babies. They grow better, they have less complications, and they have better neurodevelopmental outcomes at age 2 years. So, breast milk is brain food, okay? Now, I don't
mm.
want to offend moms who could not breastfeed or choose not to, but what I want to do today is make sure moms know that a big new study came out. It was performed by the Kaiser Family Foundation researchers. It was published in Pediatrics just in the last couple of months, and it looked at 145 primary studies. So, studies of children who were breastfed followed for varying periods of time. It also looked at 23 systemic reviews. That's where researchers pull several studies together, pool the data, and look at effects of breastfeeding over time.
Mm.
These researchers at KFF were able to put all of that data together. I'm sure there's some program that does that and measures the statistical correlations. And what they found was that breastfeeding was definitely associated with less otitis media, ear infections, less gastroenteritis, diarrhea, less upper respiratory infections, that's bronchiolitis, RSV, colds, things like that. And the evidence is very good to show that more breastfeeding is protective against those conditions. And guess
Mm.
what? Breastfed babies die of SIDS half as much as formula fed babies. That is a
Wow.
huge statistic. And we already knew that from some other data, but the KFF study confirmed that the data showing that breastfed babies die of SIDS less often are really strong. Now, the
Okay.
reason that talking about data and the strength of the data is important is that some mom influencers downplay the effects of breastfeeding.
Right.
There's a woman who writes parent data, and it's on the internet. She's an economist at Brown University, and she does a good job of presenting data to parents so they can make informed choices. But she's using older data to say that breastfeeding does not give many benefits to infants and children. The KFF study showed that children get less type 1 diabetes, less childhood leukemia, less
Wow.
asthma, less asthma, less inflammatory bowel disease. And guess what? Childhood obesity is less in breastfed infants. So the KFF study really solidified previous studies that tried to associate breastfeeding with better infant and child outcomes. And I think it's a rather definitive study, and it was received as a real landmark study to confirm the data. And the reason this is important is that moms need to hear true facts. They don't need to
Yeah.
hear an influencer saying, that's not that good. It's just a lifestyle choice. It's not a big deal. Its formula is the same or better. Moms don't need to hear misinformation. Now, some moms are going to choose not to breastfeed, and that's fine because formula is adequate nutrition for newborn babies. And formula will provide good growth for your infant and child. Now, having said that, guess what? Formula feeding is associated with childhood obesity. So we need to be very, very careful about how we frame formula feeding and how we present breastfeeding. Now, breastfeeding, I think, is best. And I've already said some moms can't do it. They try and they fail. And I want moms out there listening to just hear this one little thing. It's actually a big thing. We're mammals and we evolved over millions of years to make milk for our children, to nurse our young, like all the other mammals. And that milk provides them with the best immune protection and the best nutrition and the best food for brain growth. And so, what you're doing when you choose to breastfeed and you stick it out through a difficult first month is you're really choosing to give your baby an absolute better start.
Mm.
That doesn't mean, okay, let me be perfectly clear. If you can't breastfeed, you are not a bad mother. Lots of women cannot breastfeed for various medical reasons. And we can talk about that if you think that's interesting. But the main point I'm making is that moms need to know from medical experts, doctors like me, that the facts say that breastfeeding an infant is really better for their health and their physical well being. And it prevents SIDS. I mean, that's just amazing to know that the SIDS rate is half as much in breastfed babies. So I'm making the point today just to make sure that moms who are making these choices and reading these exchanges on mom websites and Instagram understand what the medical data say.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point that there's all these influencers out there that have this grasp on society and they're like these public figures. And then whatever they say, people are believing just because
Yes.
they're dancing in bright, shiny lights and they're telling people one thing just to sell a product or to represent a product. And it's all to make money. And that's scary because
Yeah.
I mean, breast milk and babies is one thing, but they do it for everything. So I think it's a really important point for
Yeah.
people to do their research.
Right.
And
Right.
even before we hit record, I mentioned to you a quick little story, which I think is really important to mention here, is the sale of breast milk. There's the
Oh, yeah.
sale of breast milk going on right now for people that, believe that they want to feed their baby breast milk or whatever, and people are actually selling their breast milk. What do you think about that?
Well, I want my listeners to know that there are human donor breast milk banks all over the country and in Canada and all over Europe for that matter. And you can get donor human milk for sick infants and premature infants from all those breast milk banks. And it costs a little bit because those banks pool the milk, pasteurize the milk, which means it's sterilized, and freeze it, and they dispense it to the most vulnerable high-risk babies. So the average kid down the block, full-term baby whose mom wants some donor milk, probably can't qualify to get donor milk from one of those banks.
Right.
She might want to use her neighbor's breast milk, or she might want to go on the internet and purchase breast milk from somebody on the internet. There are a number of sites and where you can do that. I want moms to be careful with that because those donors are not screened for hepatitis B or C. They're not screened for HIV or syphilis, and they're not screened for CMV. And the donor milk banks in our country do screening for all of those infectious diseases. And if you think your neighbor is hepatitis B negative just because she's a nice person,
Right.
you're not very smart. And if you think the
Yeah.
lady on the internet is going to sell you breast milk that's negative for hepatitis C and CMV, you're really falling for it. Not to mention, breast milk sold on the internet is very expensive. A couple of studies, I had some pediatrician friends who ordered some of that milk and they got it. And when they received it, it had been shipped to them in dry ice. When they received it, they cultured it and it had bacterial growth in it. It's not sterile. When moms pump their milk, some of the staph that are germs that are on the breast get into the milk. Sometimes even pathogenic germs get into the milk. And I mentioned that milk banks sterilize the milk by pasteurizing. So when you're getting milk from a friend or a neighbor or on the internet, or when you're buying it on the internet, you really don't know what you're getting. So if you
Right.
want donor milk, try to go through one of the milk banks in the country because they make an excellent product. They don't make it, moms donate it, and they treat it with TLC. Check those moms for everything imaginable. And the moms aren't paid. No money changes hands, except that if you buy the donor milk, you're paying for the processes to pasteurize it and store it. So be very careful about breast milk purchases on the internet and about trading breast milk with your friend down the street. You may not get what you think you're getting. What if that mom's on drugs? What if that mom's on a medicine that really is contraindicated in breastfeeding? What if that mom's on an ADHD med and your kid gets a bunch of an amphetamine? What if that mom is a caffeine addict like me and your breast milk is loaded with caffeine? And so you really don't know when you trade in breast milk or when you buy breast milk online exactly what you're going to be getting. So be very careful.
Yeah, no kidding. I didn't even think of that. Like the process of
Yeah,
pumping the bacteria on the breast, and then your baby's getting whatever's in there, and you never know.
yeah,
That's really,
right.
really scary,
Well,
actually.
for a normal mom feeding her normal baby, it's no big deal because
Right,
mom gives as many antibodies against that bacteria as she does any bacteria. I want to
right.
tell you another story about formula to get back to formula. If you, moms, if you go to your OB-GYN and you're pregnant, she's going to ask you to fill out a bunch of forms and whether you want to breastfeed or formula feed. And if you check off breastfeed, you're going to get in the mail coupons for formula at a discounted rate.
Mm,
A friend of mine did this study. If you check off formula feeding, you're not going to get coupons in the mail for
what?
cheap formula. The formula companies want to give coupons for formula to breastfeeding moms, just
Okay.
like they want the hospitals to donate formula samples to breastfeeding moms. A lot of the listeners, they know that when they delivered their baby, they were sent home with a few bottles of formula. What is the message there? The message is you're not going to make it. You can't do this. You need this formula just in case. That may be the case medically. It may be necessary to supplement with formula. But the message that the formula companies are giving is you have to have breast milk. You're not going to be able to do this.
Right.
And we know that moms get that subliminal message. And for them to be sending coupons to breastfeeding moms, but not to formula feeding moms, I think is just downright deceptive.
I
And
believe so
so
too. Yeah.
I don't like the marketing that's going on. I learned just last week that in Europe, must be an EU regulation, there is no formula advertising to new mothers. In the US, it's everywhere. It is
Yeah.
everywhere. It's on TV, it's in the grocery store, it's everywhere. So, moms, be careful what you're receiving from formula companies because they want you to buy their product. They are just like big pharma. Formula companies have gobs of money. Yes, they do a lot of good research, but they work by selling you formula. So think about that when you reach for a can of formula. If you're choosing formula over breastfeeding, I just want you to understand what you're choosing to offer your baby for their long-term health.
Yeah. What are some things to look for? Like, what does a really good quality formula have in it?
Well, there are some excellent formulas for preterm babies.
Mm.
Similac makes one, that's Abbott. Mead Johnson makes one, and they've got extra protein, extra calories, extra minerals, and that's what preemies need for growth. And we commonly send kids home from the hospital on those souped up preemie formulas. Full term babies don't need extra protein because they're going to take huge gobs of milk, sometimes a gallon a day. And in most of the formulas, they're all balanced well with adequate protein, adequate calories, some fat. There's some differences in the kinds of fat that are in formulas. This new formula called Bobby claims to have some improvements and be made from organic cows. Well, what's the difference between an organic cow and a regular cow? I mean, ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Nobody can tell any difference in organic formulas. The other thing is that the formula companies try to trick moms into thinking they need special formulas for like their toddler. Now they're calling toddler formulas. We in the American Academy of Pediatrics, we think that is a pile of crap because toddlers do not need special formula. Now, if your baby has galactosemia, sure, you need a special formula. If your baby is allergic to lactose, yeah, you need a soy formula. If your baby has a terrible gut condition, you need special formulas that have protein hydrolysate. That means the protein is partially digested. And there are lots of special formulas that are made to meet those needs. So I'm not saying that for special medical conditions, your child doesn't need special formulas. They do. And your pediatrician is going to help you figure that out. But the average healthy full term baby does much better off when they're breastfed. And I would say to the moms who have trouble, try to get some lactation support. Talk to a friend who's breastfed, talk to an LC. Most of them come to your house and do home visits. Ask your pediatrician if they have an LC on their staff. Ask your pediatrician if they're trained as a member of the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine. Some pediatricians have extra training and they're really good at supporting breastfeeding moms. The average family practitioner tends to be less well trained in breast milk and breastfeeding support. So I think moms need to be a little more savvy about who they're asking for help, and recognize that our culture gives way mixed messages. I mean, a mom may think, oh my God, I'm not doing a good job. I've got to be giving formula. And they start giving formula, Lisa, and then their milk supply goes down because
Right.
breastfeeding is demand and supply. The more the baby nurses, the more our body makes. And so when we throw formula in that mix, the baby gets full from formula feeding and doesn't nurse as much, and the mom doesn't produce as much. And that can start a downward spiral. So, moms that are confused about milk supply, moms that are confused about supplementation, moms that are confused about whether or not they need to do something different really need to talk to a lactation consultant or a pediatrician who's well trained in breastfeeding support.
Yes, absolutely. What are some of the most common troubles that women have when they start breastfeeding for the first time?
Oh, good question. Engorgement, your milk comes in on day 3 and you're full and your nipple gets flattened and the baby doesn't latch and it hurts and it's so painful and you may have plugged ducts. That happened to me with my first one and I didn't
Ouch.
have a very good pump. And so it was just a nightmare and I didn't know what I was doing. I was a first time mom. Here, some pediatrician and a neonatologist, and I didn't know what I was doing as a first time mom. That's how common this is. My
Yeah,
husband would
you're
help.
human.
He would massage. With my second baby, she had a tongue tie, and my nipples were so sore. I felt like she was biting me every time we nursed. She was like a shark, and so I actually got some bloody nipples, and I was very traumatized. And of course, then I got mastitis, and that's a common problem. If moms get engorgement and they can't fix their engorgement, if they don't have a good pump, if they don't have somebody explaining all this to them, if they get mastitis and they think they should stop breastfeeding. In fact, you can have roaring mastitis, a bacterial infection, and nurse through it, and your baby will not get an infection. The mastitis is the infection is in the breast tissue, not in the breast milk. So, engorgement, sore nipples, mastitis, tongue tie. The most common problem is a perception of low breast milk production. And I read
Okay.
just today something by one young mom who said, I'm just a nervous wreck. I can't sleep. My milk supply is going down. I'm not making enough. My baby is fussy. What am I supposed to do? She hadn't talked to anybody, hadn't talked to a
Oh,
pediatrician. She was asking a bunch of moms on Facebook, what should she do? Now, luckily, she went to a breastfeeding supportive Facebook group, and they gave her some pretty good advice. But this is the commonest problem. Moms think their breast milk supply is inadequate because their babies act hungry. Some babies will have a growth spurt at 2 weeks and they'll nurse like crazy every 2 hours. Some moms don't know that in the first month, a breastfed baby will nurse every 3 hours. That's not very good for sleep. And if you're trying to scroll your phone and text your friends, you're probably not napping when the baby is sleeping. And so a lot of modern moms, God bless them, are spending time on their phone and texting and sending pictures instead of taking naps and trying to figure out how to get in sync with their baby's needs. Breastfeeding is demand and supply. The baby demands and you make the milk. Some moms can't make enough milk. There is such a thing as primary lactation insufficiency. It's really rare. It only occurs in 4 to 5% of moms. That means 95% of women can make adequate milk. Some moms make too much milk. My daughter was one of those. She had sore nipples and she said, I'm not going to do this, Mom. I went, oh, okay. And she said, "Well, I'm going to pump." And I said, "Oh, good, good." So she pumped for 10 months with each of her children. I mean, it took an amazing amount of determination to do that. I said, "Well, you're missing all the good stuff when they latch and they cuddle and all that." She said, "I don't care. I just want them to get the breast milk. And I can hold them after we feed them a bottle of breast milk." I went, "Okay." And of course, they did fine. And she bonded fine. And everybody was happy and the babies grew well. She had huge milk production. She was
Yeah.
making enough milk for like twins. It was amazing.
Wow.
So there are lots and lots of different things that come up with nursing, and moms don't know because here we are, your friends. They're in their home with their husband and maybe have a friend who's breastfed. And where are they around other women that have breastfed?
Right.
Are they in play groups where moms are breastfeeding? Nope. Is their grandmother or the aunt in the family helping the mom who's breastfeeding? Nope. That's not what our culture does. Our culture puts mom in silos, alone with their husband or partner. And that's why we're on our phones trying to look for answers from other women who know what's going on. And it's not always the best information, especially if somebody just says, oh, just give formula, it's just as good. It's really not just as good. And moms can usually get the help they need to get through that toughest first few weeks. You asked me about the problems. The most common problems are in the first month or two.
Right.
After that, usually nursing is very smooth. So you
Mm,
have to kind of be committed to get through the first 2 months. And then, okay, so you get through the first 2 months, you're happily nursing your kid or pumping and bottle feeding, whatever, and it's time to go back to work. And your whole system has to change.
right.
And that's traumatic. That's very traumatic for new moms. And how many times you pump at work, and is that enough? And what do you feed the baby while you're gone? And who's taking care of your baby? And are they in daycare? Are they at home? And all of those things cause huge amounts of stress on moms. And then their milk supply goes down because when you're stressed, you don't make milk as easily. So, yes, our culture has created this situation where breastfeeding is really difficult. I'm
Yeah.
admitting that. I nursed 3 kids. My first two about killed me. And I agree, breastfeeding can be really, really difficult. But there are people out there, there are lactation consultants and pediatricians who can help, who know how to support breastfeeding moms. There are even breastfeeding support groups on Facebook that are really pretty good. Some of them are pretty good. So I want moms to be really careful where they get their information.
Mm. So I used to work with a lawyer and she had triplets and she
Mm,
would pump in her office. And I remember she said, if the door's locked, that means I'm pumping. And her door
yeah.
was locked a lot of the time because she had triplets. There was like little bottles in the lunchroom everywhere, and she was
Oh.
always washing those bottles with this scrubber, I remember. But man, she must have had to produce a lot of milk for those triplets.
Yeah, that's amazing. A lot of women can nurse twins without any trouble. A lot of my moms went home with preterm twins and they would nurse one and bottle feed the other and then switch. So they actually made enough milk for one baby, and each baby got half breast milk, half formula. And so there are lots of different ways to skin the cat. And the benefits of breastfeeding do not require exclusive breastfeeding. The more you nurse, the more the benefits. Even if you partially breastfeed, your baby's rate of SIDS goes down. So I think those data are so compelling that even if you nurse, for 6 months instead of a year, you're giving your infant the best benefits, the best start there is. And a little bit of formula supplementation is not bad, especially because we're all going back to work.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about all this. I have one more thing to touch on. What about the men who want to breastfeed? Because I've seen those like
Oh,
breasts that you can put breast milk in and the man as the baby. What are your thoughts on
yeah.
that?
Well, some of those dads are really committed to those gadgets that allow a baby to sort of pretend nurse. But what's really happening is that the breast milk is coming via a tube, and the tube or the person is letting the milk flow at a certain rate. I think that's fine if they're that into it, but male mammals do not nurse their young. male mammals help the female. And so I think women would be better served by men who bottle feed express breast milk so mom can take a nice long sleep in the middle of the night. For men who help her massage her breasts when her breasts are swollen and engorged, and a man who helps her when she's exhausted get an extra nap. So I think men are more effective when they're supportive emotionally, not when they're nursing physically. But if they want to do that, all power to them. I just think it's a little silly. I hope
Yeah,
I didn't
I'm
offend
picturing.
anybody.
They want to know what it feels like, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I
16:10.
agree. You gotta massage the woman's foot as she's sitting there
Right,
breastfeeding. How's
right.
that?
Now, a lot of the dads in the NICU want to do skin to skin.
Right.
And moms doing skin to skin increases their breast milk supply. The babies grow better. The babies have less breathing pauses called apnea. It's just so perfect because all the oxytocin hormone is flowing and the prolactin is flowing, and moms get a real physiological boost from snuggling with their baby. Dads want to do that too. And dads have
Yeah.
oxytocin, and dads love to snuggle with their babies. So if a dad is doing the breast milk feeding gadget just to be close to his baby, I guess that's fine. I guess that's wonderful because they want to see what the experience is. But it's not
Mm.
like the baby's ever going to nurse off of a man. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find out more of your stuff and read more of your stuff?
On my website, susanlandersmd.com, I have a book about um, late preterm babies because they're very hard to breastfeed. I have a book called Newborn Nurture, teaching moms how to read their baby's cues. My newsletter, Moms Matter, is free, and listeners can subscribe to that. On Instagram, I have the link to my newsletter, and my newsletter is published on Substack, but it's free. All you have to do is sign up with your email, and you can do that on my website as well. So go to susanlandersmd.com. That's the place where you can check out the books, the blogs, the newsletter. You can contact me. I love to hear from moms. I love to answer questions. Even though I'm older and retired, I still know a lot about babies and children.
Thank you so much for being here today and for talking about all things breast milk. There's one last thing that popped into my head that I want to ask
What?
you about.
What?
Like a woman who has a friend that suddenly develops breast milk and she's not pregnant. I've heard of that happening before. Have you heard of that happening?
Yeah, and it can be related to a pituitary tumor. Now,
Mm.
also, we'll see adoptive mothers pump their breasts, and some of them can induce lactation. And some of those adoptive mothers, they're not the biological mother, they did not give birth. Some of those women can produce a milk supply. There's some drugs that can be given that stimulate milk supply and stimulate letdown. And so, yes, there are some manipulations that can do that. And some women can make milk. But generally, if somebody's making milk and they're not pregnant or haven't delivered, you need to talk to your doctor about that because that's not quite normal. And there may be something going on in the pituitary, part
Right.
of the
So
brain. Yeah.
you can't will yourself to breastfeed is
No.
basically what I'm asking.
No, well, you can only do that if you pump your breasts and you're not pregnant and you take a medicine that helps you make milk and it requires
Mm.
a lot of pumping every 3 hours for
Oh,
20 or
wow.
30 minutes. And so some
Ouch.
women do that, and some adoptive mothers love that, and they can nurse maybe part of the time. So, yes, it's possible. But if it just happens all by itself, that's not normal.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. And thanks again for being here. It's always such a pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, and to our audience, be careful out there. Don't listen to everything you're reading. Read Dr. Susan Lander's stuff because she knows her stuff and she is not selling breast milk on the internet in the black market. Until next time, have a good day, everyone, and keep those babies safe. Bye.